Five, four, three, two, one, go. We are back to the Awful Takes podcast. My name is Nabahi. I am joined by my co-host Wallied.
Hello, I'm Wallied from Circator Productions.
Took a little bit of a hiatus for a little bit. The month of May got really busy just with work and things. During that time, though, we have watched a lot of movies, different things that we're going to surely catch up on. We have busy lives, but we're obviously trying our best. But we're excited. We're excited to be back. A lot of things to talk about today. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good. Super excited to have this discussion finally, as I've been kind of wanting to discuss this film for a while. And then, just everything's just been going good, considering just it's been like a crazy past couple of months and everything,
It's always nice to come in on a weekend and just sit down and talk our love of movies. At least that's just how I am. I can do this all the time. So I'm very excited. So be ready for some of my awful takes on things. That's the name of the show. I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I decided to make a channel to spread my awful knowledge and horrible ideas. So here we go. Today's discussion is going to be about Oldboy. Very excited. A lot of hype went into this film. But before we get to that, we got some things I wanted to talk about in the world of movies. For instance, the state of movies are in a weird place over the past couple of years, ever since the pandemic. Studios knowingly went into the pandemic, I guess, with the hopes of just making money and trying to recuperate costs from films that they had made. And what had ended up happening is the theaters kind of got left out of the deal. And they almost were just skipped over, and films were starting to be distributed, whether it was straight to streaming or video on demand purchasing, things like that. And most studios nowadays have their own main streaming services. So what you were seeing happening during the pandemic was big budget movies getting dropped on streaming, sometimes even before they went to theaters or on the same day that they would come out. And at the time, obviously, we couldn't go to theaters, so it was kind of like, well, either you watch it at home or that's it, There would be some limited releases and things like that, but I think the movie industry ended up hurting itself pretty bad, and I don't think it's ever fully recovered. Obviously, there have been some big hits between now and then, but very few of them are, original IP movies and things like that. Most of the time, it's just, your typical blockbusters that kind of rake in the cash. What ends up happening, I would want to say, is you have movies that are looked at, and usually by the opening weekend box office, the movies are already determined whether or not they are successful or a failure. For instance, a movie that came out at the beginning or in the middle of May, Furiosa, had a very, very hard time at the box office, and it is continuing to fall. Granted, I know, even Fury Road wasn't a super successful film, but it really calls into question what studios are going to do moving forward with these types of movies. I feel like your movies are either going to cost $200+ million or they're going to cost under $10 million. And I feel like we're kind of losing those middle grounds of, kind of experimental films that cost more than your average film, but not so big that it's a big blockbuster. It's a very scary thought to think that these studios are just going to put these movies on streaming and that's it. It'll just be the end of theaters, At least that's kind of the thought that I have. I'd say so far this year, the really only financial successful movie we've really had was Dune 2.
Dune 2.
I think other than that, everything has been kind of struggling. I think the new Planet of the Apes movie recently kind of broke even. But even then, it's just so different than before the pandemic. There would just be movies that, every week movies would just keep raking in money. Now it's changed. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
So I feel like with obviously COVID had a very big impact on this for sure, but I think as the years have gone on, and especially with the rise of streaming, I feel like people are just going to theaters to go see films less and less because they just get put on streaming so quickly, like a month or two later, that people just don't even really want to bother to go see a lot of those films. I think maybe the other problem that could also be happening too is also marketing and how these films are getting marketed sometimes to people. Because I feel like sometimes they do little, because a while back they used to do a lot of marketing where it was like you'd see posters of it, you'd see billboards of it, you would see like commercials for it. But I feel like nowadays you only see like maybe a few online ads and maybe like a trailer that like a couple weeks before the movie comes out. So there isn't a lot of hype. And I'm not saying that's like for every film, but some films I feel like get that kind of treatment where it's like it's kind of just dumped last minute. It's like, oh wait, this is coming out, you know? I think the other thing too is like I feel like audiences just maybe aren't as interested in a lot of the films that are getting released and financed too. That could also be like a very massive play because people are kind of noticing that it's like they're kind of just getting the same thing that they've been getting for like the last 5 years with like maybe those type of Marvel movies like the Marvels or like what was it, that Eternals recent Eternals, like, you know, it's just hasn't been like it used to be with the blockbusters. And every once in a while you get like the Barbie or Oppenheimer, but that's kind of it, you know, if that makes sense.
I just feel like the studios themselves, when they adjusted for the pandemic of doing like, okay, 1 day release and then 45 days later, like I forget which studio it was. I don't know if it was Sony. No, it wasn't Sony. Sony's actually been the one that hasn't been doing that. I think it might have been Warner Brothers. They had announced that movies going forward, unless it generates a certain amount of money, it'll drop on streaming and video on demand like 45 days after.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like, well, movies before they'd go on streaming, it would be at minimum like 6 to 9 months, you know?
Yeah.
So it was like, it almost became like, well, if it's going to be that long and everyone's talking about these movies, I have to go to the theater to see it. Like everyone, it just became like, that's how movies were. It's just like I got to see it or I'm going to miss out on this moment in like pop culture, you know? Compared to now, it's just like, well, I just got to wait 45 days. I mean, that's not that long. It's a month and a half. Like, it really is just like, yeah, I can wait, you know? And I feel like once the pandemic was starting to, you know, fizzle down, they never adjusted back to what they were doing. And I think the studios don't realize that. They wonder why these movies aren't making money. But when you have all these deals in place about people know when movies are coming to streaming, you know,
it's like you've kind of set that up for your audience pretty much, where it's like, well, now you don't have to go see it in theaters unless it is actually a movie you want to see. Yeah. But a lot of the time it's just, they have to wait, you know?
Yeah.
And I think this kind of also raises something that I feel like with the state of how it is, I feel like it's just in a very dry spot at the moment, especially because, like you mentioned, we don't have mid-budget films like we used to like 10, 20 years ago. But I feel like if maybe the studios maybe see this now with like considering like how much inflated budgets there are, where some films are costing like $200 to $300 million, I think they might see that and be like, okay, maybe we should tone it down a bit and maybe give like 10, 20, $30 million to some of these films. And I can maybe see in the future maybe there being this kind of like golden age or maybe renaissance like they did in like the late 90s, where you just start getting like all these really great mid-budget films. So I'm cautiously optimistic that could happen in the future, especially with all of these films not doing really well and a lot of these films bombing.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe that's like kind of like a possibility, but
I hope so. I hope they kind of look at the books and kind of rein in the budgets a little bit, because it's just, it sets, if we're not in that day and age anymore, you can't have those astronomical expectations of, well, if my film costs 300 million to make, I have to make double that and just to break even, you know? And it's like, I can't think of many movies over the past 2 years that have made 600 plus $1 million, you know?
yeah.
It's even like right now, like, I think Planet of the Apes is at like 500 million, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, the past couple Marvel movies, they haven't made their budgets, you know? They lost money. The only one that made decent money was Guardians 3.
Yeah.
And it's just like, right now, obviously, you have one coming up that's a very successful film, and it's bringing back legacy characters, but it's like, that's what it takes to get people to come back, you know?
But I guess my question is, how much more can we rely on that before people are just kind of getting tired of that like shtick, you know?
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily like getting tired of that. I think what it is just people, like we said, it's just like, when it comes across as, this doesn't really feel like there's much passion behind it, you know? Like, obviously seeing the trailers for the Marvels and everything, I was just kind of not as interested as I would be, you know? I don't really think it pertained to me about bringing back legacy characters or things like that, because back in the early phases of Marvel, like, I'm sorry, but seeing Ant-Man for the first time, I didn't really care that much about the cameos that were in it. I wasn't really excited for that, you know? But they had made me excited to see what they had coming next. And I think it's going to take a little bit of, you know, self-criticism, finding out like, okay, what do we need to do to like right this ship? Because I would say, obviously, if we have big budget movies that are doing well, I think smaller movies can kind of piggyback off of that, you know? If there's a successful movie in theaters and families are going to go see it, but it's not for everyone, they might be like, well, what else can we see during that time? You know?
Yeah.
Things like that. And I really hope these studios just kind of get rid of these deals, you know? Like, knowing a film's coming out 45 days after streaming, I'm sorry, I'll just wait. Like, I really will just, I have no urgency to see it.
I guess they just don't like money.
I mean, unless people are like really talking about it, I'll go. But it's just like, if I know it's coming, I really might as well just save the money. I'm paying for my streaming service anyways. So I guess I would akin a success to that more recently would probably be Godzilla -1. It was in theaters like 7 months ago, and it's barely now coming to streaming at the beginning of the month, you know? And it was kind of a big deal. Like, it was jumped to the #1 on Netflix right away. I feel like there was so much talk going on of like, when is this movie coming to streaming? When is it coming to video on it? Where can I purchase this film? Especially with it being a foreign film. It's a little bit harder to find. And 2 months ago, an edit got put up, but it was Japanese and it had no English subtitles, you know? So it's just like, I felt like there was excitement behind that of like, when's the movie coming out? You know, I missed it. And it was almost like, dang, I really did miss out. I should have went to the theaters to go see it, you know? Granted, it's no reflection of the quality of the film. I liked it, but I really felt like it reminded me of movies before the pandemic. Not, I can see it now or I can just wait. I don't know. It's just a weird state we're in with, I just hear a lot of negativity coming out with each movie and how it's performing. And it sucks because start to see movies being made in a different context, you know, and that's what I don't want.
Of course.
Obviously, the movies, the movie theater chains have survived multiple things. Obviously, when VHS came out, everyone said it's the death of theaters. DVDs came out, they said it was the death of theaters.
History repeating itself.
Streaming came out, they said it was the death of theaters when streaming started 10 plus years ago, and here we are. So I think they can find a way to make it bounce back, But I think there's more to look at than the successes of certain films, and more what they need to do is look at the mistakes of some of the films that haven't worked, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone sees Barbie and Oppenheimer and wants to copy that cultural impact, but you can't really go into something to try to replicate that.
Mm-hmm.
Start looking at your movies that aren't doing so well and what's really the problem. It's not that people don't want to see it. It's just you've kind of gimmicked yourself out of an audience. I don't know. That was all I had for that. Another interesting bit of movie news. No one's going to know what I'm talking about.
I didn't know.
Anyone who's a film person doesn't know what I'm talking. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to know what I'm talking about, then great. For those of you who don't know, there's a theater chain called the Alamo Drafthouse, and they are like the elitist chains of theaters. Not in like a bad way, but just like they care about film. They care about the cinema experience. They have very strict rules in place. You're not allowed to be on your phone. Very minimal. Yeah, I don't even think you can like talk or anything like during movies. It's very much meant to be for the cinema experience.
The filmmaker's church.
Yep. But ever since the pandemic, the Alamo Drafthouse has been in pretty bad financial trouble. Obviously, we found out first year of the pandemic that movie theaters and movie chains were operating on super thin margins. There wasn't much room for mistakes or errors, things like that. So when the pandemic came along and there was no audience to go to their theaters, purchase movie tickets, buy concessions, they almost immediately were in the red and they were in trouble just because their margins were just so thin that they didn't really plan for something like this. So there was so much talk about AMC shutting down, Regal shutting down, all these main theaters chains shutting down. Now, for those of you who don't know, there is, I don't know, this has to be like a legal rule because I've heard about it for so long. Movie studios are not allowed to own theater chains. You're not allowed to, you know, it's almost like a car distributor, you know?
Yeah.
Like car makers are not allowed to sell their own cars straight from, they have to go through a dealership, you know? And movies are pretty much the same way, like theater chains and stuff. They're not owned by these studios. Warner Brothers doesn't own Regal, Cinemark, nothing. But recently, that has changed. Sony, it came out a couple days ago, Sony has purchased Alamo Drafthouse, which is like insane. I don't know how they were able to get that done. I don't know what rules they were able to bypass. It's so weird. I know stuff about Alamo, but I've never been to their theater to experience it.
Neither have I.
I really want to go. Obviously, the state we live in doesn't have this sort of things that most states do, but it's a very big deal. You know, Sony has purchased this theater chain, and what is going to happen to it? Are they going to uphold the rules that they had in place? Are they going to change it? Are they going to have limited showings in their own specific chain? You know, things like that. I'm very curious to see what is going to happen because this is something that hasn't happened. I don't know if you have much to say on it. I mean, obviously you didn't know too much.
I didn't know too much, but I guess they just want to premiere Morbius and Madam Web over there. So obviously we'll get more Madam Web screenings.
Madam Web will be played every day at the Alamo Drafthouse.
No.
You can catch it in the evening.
But jokes aside, though, I guess my kind of thought when you had told me was like surprise. Like I didn't know that distributor could buy a theater chain. So I guess what kind of concerns me a bit is if they're only just going to play Sony movies exclusively there and like maybe nothing else, you know, because from what I can tell with Drafthouse, they seem like maybe more of like an indie theater chain, you know, where they kind of play more smaller, lesser known films or maybe foreign films. But I feel like with Sony buying them, I feel like it's going to be maybe exclusively like just Sony major films, maybe, you know?
I will say, as far as Sony goes, they have their hits, they have their misses, but the one thing I do respect about them during the pandemic and even now, they are committed to their theater releases.
Yeah.
They don't have a streaming service. They don't dump their movies on streaming right away. It kind of takes a little bit before they get their, full release on streaming and video on demand. And that's something they've seemed to be sticking to, which is pretty, right now it's pretty rare, You had studios like Warner Brothers doing day-and-day releases, like Godzilla and Kong, like when that came out, like you could go to the theaters or it was at home, Same day, you could just watch it at home. Same thing with, I think Paramount, they would do those day-and-day releases with their films, whether or not it was on their streaming service or other streaming services was different. But Sony seems to stick to, I guess, preserving that theater experience.
Which surprises me a lot. 'Cause, like, I would never guess that. But I do respect that even though some of the films they do put in theaters, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Madam Web? Okay, guys.
And
right.
and everyone shortly after, Disney Plus was made, everyone started jumping on the streaming service bandwagon, and everyone was wondering when Sony was going to do theirs, but it has yet to happen. So I think, to a very small degree, that maybe the purchasing of this theater chain was kind of saying, you know what? We're still committed to the theater business. This is something we still want to do. We want to preserve it. Yeah. And if we have to maintain these theaters, if we have to pay to keep them open, that's just what we're going to do, I can hope that was the reasoning behind it, because I think it's very interesting that it was Alamo Drafthouse. Like you said, it's a very smaller theater chain, It's a very religious type experience. So I guess we'll see if other studios want to follow suit. I know most of the theater chains are a little bit more out of the danger zone that they were in, but obviously with movies underperforming right now, it can go either way. But I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see. All right. It's big boy time, or should I say old boy time. That was awful. It has a cult following. I had heard about it for so long. I had never taken the time to sit down and watch it. I guess for a while, wasn't it pretty hard to find?
Very hard to find for a long while. It was like you could not watch it anywhere for a long time. And so it was kind of just like on and off, like other streaming services. It was like on physical, like at one point, but it's just kind of been scattered for the most part, unfortunately.
And he had told me that this was going to be our next review. And I was sitting at home on a Sunday and just going across Netflix, and boom, there it was. And I was like, all right, it's time to do this. I'm going to get it done. And I started it. And again, I surprisingly have avoided spoilers, everything. I really didn't know much. I guess the most I had seen was maybe some screenshots and posters, but that was really it. I didn't even have any recollection or memory of the 2012 one or 2010 one that came out.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my brother, our cousin had worked at a theater at the time, so she would give him just posters, just because he would like to hang up posters in his room, movie posters. Nice. And one of the ones she gave him was for the reboot of Oldboy. And it didn't click with me, but after I watched this movie, I went back to look at that newer rebooted one, and I was like, wow, I remember that poster. He had it in his room, and it never really interested me. But here we are. Wallied, if you just want to start us off, and I'll jump in.
Well, so this was my recommendation. I recommended Park Chan-wook's Oldboy, the 2003 one, and it is a classic. All right, let's get into ratings. Just kidding. No, I'm just joking. General plot of the film, it is basically about a man named Oh Dae-soo who is imprisoned for 15 years. And basically, he gets out and he has to find the guy who imprisoned him and find out why he was imprisoned for 15 years in 5 days, pretty much. And that is all I will say without getting into spoilers. So if you guys have not seen the film, please watch it and come back to this episode, because this is a very easy film to spoil, and we are going to be spoiling the hell out of it. So please, if you have not seen it, go watch it and come back and listen to this discussion. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I guess the way I kind of came across this film, it was not the first film I had seen from this director. So I had seen like a handful of films of his before, like The Handmaiden and I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay. And it wasn't until after seeing The Handmaiden, I was like, okay, I got to see this Oldboy film. But before it coming to Netflix and Neon buying the rights to it, it was very hard to find. And when I eventually did see it, because one library had it, I got the copy immediately, and I had watched it, and just it blew me away like the first time seeing it. Like, it was like the best revenge film I had ever seen, and it's still my favorite revenge film ever made. You know, just like the way it blends genres really well, the way the characters are, like, you learn so much not only about the main character but about the villain. And man, there's so much. But before I kind of shower praise to this film and everything, Nabahi, I know this was your first time seeing this. What did you think of it?
Obviously, going into it, it was hyped up, but not in a way that I would say like a normal movie is hyped up. I guess more recent releases, you know, like just it's different. Like, you hear about movies in a certain way and they can just reach crazy expectations. But that was never the case with this movie. It was more so people would hype up the experience of just simply just being like, just watch it, you know? I guess that's where my excitement came from, just because no one ever really told me like you're gonna love it. Compared to movies that are hyped up now, is just like, you'll love it. You'll think it's great. Oh, it's so good. You'll like this, which is absolutely the case.
Yeah.
While you are watching this movie, right away, your attention is just grabbed. Very short intro before the plot just takes a left turn. And throughout the movie, that's what just keeps happening. Left turn after right turn, and it just goes in crazy directions that you just cannot predict. I don't know, some people I've seen online say like, oh, you can predict like where it's going. It's just like, for some reason when I was watching it, like I was just constantly being surprised. My expectations were just being subverted in a good way. Yeah, I just was totally floored by the end. By the end, you just can't really believe what you're watching, you know? Mm-hmm. And I will agree with Wallied. It has to be one of the greatest revenge movies of all time. It's almost like while you're watching it, your main character, you are kind of rooting for his revenge. Obviously, he had been in prison for 15 years. He comes out basically a shell of a human at this point, and you're rooting for him along the whole way. And when the twist kind of happens, it recontextualizes like the overall story of revenge, to where what you had kind of actually been watching was the villain's revenge the whole time.
It's this really great misdirection that I've never seen done as well and as executed as this film has, you know?
Yeah.
And it almost makes you, it puts you in this gray area. And this is one of the reasons why I love this film so much, is that it doesn't side with either one of the characters, because they're both really terrible people and they both did really awful things to each other, but not once does it make you agree with either side. Mm-hmm. It's like you get to see both perspectives and why they're getting their revenge to begin with.
Yeah. And that was just a crazy twist, you know, and I think that's why it does make it one of the greatest revenge stories, just because it's like both sides are at each other. Usually these tales of revenge and things are just pretty one-sided, just
Yeah.
someone is wronged in a certain way, and the other one has to go and seek vengeance to, feel whole again,
Mm-hmm.
At no point during this movie did I feel like if the characters got what they wanted, they would become normal again,
No.
It's just like, whoa, like these are just two insane people, and that's how the film treats it.
Yeah, and just like how far they go for like their revenge too, like at one point where like the villain literally kills like his best friend, because he's like talking about like his sister, and it's like it's understandable, but it's like God, it hurts so much because it's like that's his friend, and it's like he's losing everything as like the film goes along, like it's just like this downhill from like there pretty much.
Yeah.
I really love the fast pace of this film. You talked about how the film grabs your attention quickly. It really does, and not once there is ever a single dull moment in the entire film. Like even like the slower paced moments where it does slow down a bit for like those character moments, or it's like talking about like, like the villain's motivations and all that, like it's still super entertaining. You're still super invested like the entire time.
Yeah.
And the editing, just how quick it goes. Like
so
just
good.
So many quick cuts and so much exposition is communicated super well, where it's like it's never like convoluted or confusing or like too rushed to understand. Like it's the perfect pace.
It really is. I felt like while the movie was just going along, it's almost like it was hard for my attention to be diverted elsewhere, because sometimes when I'm watching movies it's just kind of like, I'll kind of glance at my phone or this and this, but it was really doing a good job of just I think is what you said, the editing really just makes it engaging, and it's just like every take, every cut, I would just be like, all right, well, I just want to figure out what's going on. Super, super well done, and so many like awesome shots,
incredible
crazy visuals. Well, obviously, we have to talk about it.
The hallway
fight scene. I think we have seen where all these modern movies are getting their inspiration from. It has to be this scene, because I felt like I was watching something that comes out now, like John Wick, Daredevil had to have not copied, but drew inspiration from this fight scene. Just an amazing one take in this hallway that just follows the main character along while he's fighting like 20 guys. But it's not done in like a flashy way. It's just super brutal and there's not like any over the top choreography.
Restrained and like grounded, and even like the character fighting, like he's not even like the best fighter, but it's like you're still just like if he's gonna make it or not. You're not even sure if he's like gonna be able to make it through like all these people,
Yeah, and I'm 100% positive that Daredevil had to drew inspiration from that, because it's like first season of Daredevil, that hallway fight scene, like he's getting tossed around, thrown around, beaten up, and watching Oldboy, it's the exact same. And Oldboy, the character is just getting thrown around, he's getting beaten up, but he's still going. It's just like, wow, like. At no point did I feel like the main character was like invincible, or it was just like, this guy's the amazing badass,
Yeah, he's not. It's like he's just like this regular drunk person that just happened to have gotten like super in prison, and it's like now has to like fight for his life now, pretty much, And
it's like, he's back at the place where he was held captive.
Yeah.
He's got some serious emotion driving him, and that's what that whole scene felt like.
One of my favorite scenes when he goes back to the place he was tortured was where he actually like goes back to torture the guy himself. And there's this really incredible, uncomfortable, extreme close-up shot on like his teeth where he's like hitting him with like a hammer almost, and it's just like it's so brutal. Pulling him out for like every year that he was in that like jail, like that cell, pretty much. And it's just like it's so good, and it's like just really disturbing. It's almost like has like this kind of like horror element almost to the film,
Yeah, and so much is like set up in his imprisonment,
Yeah.
But it's it's done in like you said, it's edited very well.
It shows that passage of time extremely well, where it's like you can tell it's like been 15 years,
Yeah.
instead of like like a title card or like some goofy corny montage or something like that,
Yeah. Obviously, we have to talk about the plot twist and everything that goes on with it. It's going to be a little hard to talk about. This movie is probably one of the most uncomfortable experiences I've had. It's very effective at what it wants to do, but it can be hard to watch. So if you guys ever check it out, just
a little
be ready. Yeah, be ready and let it play out, I guess. Just let it play out, because by the end, like I said, it's you've never really seen anything like this movie. It really stands the test of time. It holds up over the amount of revenge stories that have come out,
Yeah.
Okay. So in the film, very early on, after he escapes from prison, he goes to this food place, and he is being served by one of the workers there.
Mm-hmm.
And he and her end up, I guess, falling in love.
Yeah, they end up sort of working together, but as the film goes along, they eventually like fall in love with each other pretty much.
Because he wanted information from her, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yes. So as the movie goes along, they fall in love. Obviously, it's addressed that he's older than she is.
Mm-hmm.
But, they make it work and everything. And the romance, it develops pretty organically, I would say.
Yeah, it doesn't feel forced.
Yeah. At some points, it's just like he had been in prison for so long that it's just like he kind
of needs like a romantic connection.
Yeah,
almost,
he was starved of it for so long that it's just like he's kind of stripped down to like basic instincts,
Mm-hmm.
So in the film, they end up hooking up and everything, and I guess the scene is played for more like, I don't know, just like kind of like humor, I guess. I don't know. That was just kind of like what I was getting from it. I was like, it's kind of uncomfortable. It feels just kind of weird, but I didn't really think anything of it. Then our main villain is introduced. He finds his way to pretty much who had been imprisoning him, and his name is Lee Woo Jin.
Yep.
And his introduction is amazing. I don't know. I wasn't ready for what his whole plan was. And it's such a cool scene. Like they meet inside this apartment or building, and it's just him and this other guy standing there. And it's almost like a Mexican standoff moment of like, I got you. But then it turns out that the other guy has planned this whole thing out. This is what he wants.
Yeah.
And he has an escape ready, or he's also got this guy that he's imprisoned, and he's able to outsmart him, and he's able to trick him to where it's like, you can't really kill me yet. And it's done really, really well, and the actor's performance is so good.
He eats up every scene in that film.
Yeah,
he really does steal the show,
but he makes it a point to tell him that this is happening for a reason. You did something that is irredeemable, and they don't explain it past that. But at that point, the point of intrigue becomes you wanting to see this guy get revenge, to now you kind of want to find out, why was he put there in the first place? At least that's how my mind kind of latched onto. And throughout the course of the film, obviously there's more back and forth that happens, but what ends up happening is there's this final confrontation. The main character makes it to our villain, and it is kind of exposed why he did what he did. So it had turned out that years ago, when they were in high school together, I believe it was high school, our villain was actually in love with his sister. Very, like I said, very crazy. And he ends up hooking up with his sister. But while that was happening, our main character
Peeped in.
And they had seen that it was him. The main character quickly leaves, and he doesn't think, he's just like weirded out by it, and he ends up telling someone in passing what he had seen.
And it blows out of proportion.
It pushes his sister to the point of not wanting to live anymore, the embarrassment of everything. And it shows that whole flashback, and it's very effective. It's done in such a good way. And it shows that she had ended up passing, but it doesn't really show exactly how it happened, just that she was like thrown off a bridge or fallen off a bridge.
Yeah.
And she ended up dying. And that's why he ended up seeking his revenge, you know? And right there, I was like, wow, okay, that's makes sense. That's pretty effective. It's really good, you know? As he's about to go and try to kill him, there's one little thing that was left out. It's revealed in such a crazy way. Basically, what he sets up is this photo album of the family that was taken from him. It's revealed in such a good way. The main character goes to this box, opens it up, and there's this photo album sitting there, and he just starts to go through it. And coincidentally, his girlfriend at the time was also being held captive. She is given the same option of looking at this box of that was going to reveal something big. As he starts flipping through the album, sees his family and everything, because he doesn't know what became of them, right?
Yeah, he does not.
He does not know. I think he knows his wife had passed away.
His wife had like died. The film briefly goes over it like in the intro during like one of the news segments when he's like imprisoned, and that's kind of really all we get from that.
Yeah, his family was taken from him. And as he's going through this photo album, you see pictures of the family and you know, the years pass on and everything. And what had ended up happening was it is revealed that shows his daughter growing up. And as it turns out, the daughter was the girl that he had hooked up with at the restaurant. And it's completely flipped. You had been exposed to this guy with his sister, and it's like, well, now I set it up. You did something even worse. Now what do you have to say about it, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just completely like, what the hell is going on?
When I first saw that twist, I'm not even kidding. Like after the movie was over, I had to like look it up just to make sure. I was like, wait, I'm looking at this right? He really just did that?
Yep. It is shocking. So shocking. And the reveal is in such a good way, just showing the photos, and you start to see her grow up, and you just see, wait a minute, that's the girl. And you're just like, oh my God. Our main character then has like in a complete mental breakdown. He is just begging for this villain not to tell her, don't expose anything, I'll do whatever you want. And he's basically stripped back down to those animal instincts, and he's just in complete shambles. He's making a fool of himself, you know, and he's just trying to find any way to make sure that nothing
ever revealed
or found out.
That is genuinely like the most devastating scene in like the entire movie for me.
And the villain just starts laughing, you know, it's just like what he has wanted this whole time. Earlier, when the villain was first revealed, it showed that he has like a heart implant or something. Like his heart doesn't run right.
Yeah, and he needs like a machine to run it or something.
He has a machine to run it, and he has this switch that will basically turn that machine off. And if he wants, you know, to kill him, he can use it, you know.
Yep.
It was basically set up in that first scene of like, you want to kill me? Well, I can just press this button at any time and I'll die, but you'll never know why I was trying to get revenge on you.
Mm-hmm.
Very effective. That thing is pulled back in this scene. He gives it to him and is like, here it is. And he starts walking away.
One last misdirection.
Yep. So he grabs it. His whole plea of begging for life is like, just completely undone because he's like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna grab it, I don't want anyone to know. Presses play or presses it, and it starts to play audio of when him and his daughter were hooking up, and I was just like, oh my god, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, what is, like, I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
It was like, how much more messed up could it get?
And he just goes into the elevator, and but next is, I think, my favorite scene, cut together so well. He's in the elevator and he mimics like him holding out, and then it shows the flashback of how his sister really died, that he was with her on the bridge, holding on to her, crying. He loved her, you know, in a sick way, but he really loved her, and I don't know, like it was just like such an emotional moment. It's very quick. I think it's like a minute long.
Yeah.
And I think he realizes like he can't have this information get out, you know? So he lets go, you know? She wants him to let go.
Yeah.
And it's just very sad. And then it's cut back together between him there and him in the elevator. And it's cut in such a good way. You see him start to form like a gun in his hand when he was on the bridge. And then it cuts back to him in the elevator. Very quick, impactful shot of him just shooting himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done. And you see the blood just splatter over the wall. He falls to the ground. And I was just like,
it's crazy.
Wow. I was like, wow, I was not ready for this.
Yeah. The other thing, too, with that scene also that I realized watching this, like, for my third time was, like, the villain really wins at the end of the day. You know, it's like the reason I feel like he shot himself was it's like he got all the revenge he wanted. Yeah. And it's like he has no reason to live anymore. He doesn't to, like, finally let go and move on pretty much, you know.
It really is like he doesn't have, what was taken from him was, you know, his will to live and everything when he had lost his sister, and it's just like, and to him nothing can replace that. Yeah. And it's almost like he stayed alive just to fulfill this, you know, revenge. Yeah. Very, very effective. That 15-minute span, 10-minute span is just crazy. Like,
it's insane.
There's more brutal like fighting that happens. The reveals are done so well. They're built up well, and the payoff is very good.
There's so many incredible callbacks and foreshadowing throughout. Like, one of my favorite examples was like when they held the girl hostage, like near the middle of the film, and like he gets back at him. He gets back at Odesu for torturing him, and he tries to take out his teeth, but then he doesn't. And then once he leaves, he's like, "You should have just got my tongue instead." And then there's another callback with the tongue thing too, before the twist reveal, where he says, Lee Woo Jin tells him, he's like, "Your tongue got my sister pregnant," pretty much, you know. Wow. And it's like, wow, it's like they really set up that whole him cutting off his tongue thing, like from like the middle of the film almost. Yeah. You know? There was a cool detail I really picked up on also, where it's like throughout the film, this shade of green will pop up like anytime like the main character's on the screen. So if he's like in a specific place, like either like a glare will happen or like it'll be like kind of more obvious that it's like green. And I feel like it's a great representation of like Lee Woo Jin pretty much haunting him, even like when he's not there or if he's like getting tracked. I thought that was like a really awesome use of like color throughout the film. And it's like, it really kind of goes to show you how like kind of terrifying this villain is. I love the transformation where it's like in the beginning of Odesu, where it's like he's like this kind of like fat middle-aged drunk, you know, where he's like at the police station, you know, and it's like for his daughter's birthday party, but he's like not there at the party. He's like here and like stuck in the cell, and it's like just that whole body transformation and like that whole like performance was like super, super well done, you know?
Yeah.
That was like a really great like character progression and evolution for me. And then one more foreshadowing thing, the wings. He puts on the wings at the beginning of the film, and then after the reveal, his daughter puts on the wings and does like the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was like kind of like funny. It was like kind of a little funny touch. I want to get your opinion on the ending. What are your thoughts on that ending?
So the ending goes into our main character almost having basically him and the daughter stay together. I don't think it's like romantically or anything, but they end up, after he escapes, they find each other again, and they're recluse to somewhere, secluded. And he gets the option of almost getting like brainwashed or almost hypnotized. His memory gets erased, and he won't have any memory of anything, but also he won't have any memory of him and his daughter, I think.
Yeah, their whole pretty much relationship and all of the revenge and everything that you've seen like throughout the film.
Yeah. And it's never explicitly said that he does it, or he does, right?
He does do it.
He does do it.
But it's not, what's more interpretable is if he still has like a bit of that memory still left.
Yeah, because he sees the daughter and he has a very interesting expression on his face.
It's almost like happy,
like pain,
sad, but also like it's bittersweet, I guess would maybe be the word I'd describe it,
Yeah. I think it's really meant to show like people who do these things live for these reasons of whether it's to complete the cycle of violence that happened to you. Your life goes by as it happens,
Mm-hmm.
You age, you get older, you miss out on stuff. And it's almost like the realization of I can never go back to, I hope one day I can go back and reclaim some part of me that was left behind or whatever. And it's just like, you're different now,
Mm-hmm.
The vengeance and everything, it took that away,
Yeah.
and very like interesting ending, very bittersweet. I wouldn't say it goes in one way or the other just by the expression on his face. Yeah, I guess it is kind of left up to that interpretation of.
Mm-hmm. I feel like a part of him still kind of knows, because when she says "I love you," like whispers it to him, it's like it's almost kind of like this sort of reminder, almost, where it's like it's not as bad of like maybe like a PTSD type of thing, but it's still like that memory still kind of lingers almost,
Yeah, and the daughter was never revealed the information,
so she doesn't know.
She doesn't know. Crazy. I've told Wallied this. This has to be one of the top 5 cinema villains of all time. Like, this guy was just amazing.
Yeah.
That's like my biggest takeaway from this movie was just how well I think the villain was done in the short amount of time that he's there.
Yeah, because he's not in it for a long time. You don't even really get the villain until like an hour into the movie.
And I think it really is kind of meant to show that like these things that can happen is just like it reduces both sides to their lowest points,
Yeah.
And the whole time you're seeing, reality that the villain has created for, this main character, and you're seeing the results of his side of vengeance,
There's a great line too, also to get more to your point, where he mentions to Odesu, he's like, well, you're like in a bigger prison now, pretty much. How does it feel to be in like a much bigger prison? It's like, at first I didn't understand that line, but like I think seeing it like a couple more times, it's like it kind of does make sense. It is almost like a prison for them of like the revenge and everything,
Yeah.
It's almost like I think it really encapsulates what the film is going for, though, where it's like these guys are so stuck in like this revenge cycle almost, that it's like it's more of like a mental prison than like an actual physical prison,
Yeah. the way the choices, that all the information was unfolded in the way it happened, were just brilliant. I feel like if this story was done now, it would show the villain setting things up before we meet our main character, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that it's so quickly shown our main character then straight to imprisonment is just like, it leaves that sense of wonder of like, what is this place? What's happening, you know? And then he breaks out. There are other people there, and you're just like, okay, is this just like a experiment or something, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just, everything is just slowly revealed, and there's just payoffs to everything, you know? And it's done in such a really good way. And it's just like, even when I was saying in the climax, like they show the flashback of the story of him and his sister, they don't show her dying, you know?
No,
and then they
don't.
wait till later on to reveal that. And it's just like, these choices of when they choose to reveal information, when they choose to have these payoffs, is just so smart. It's just like,
very purposeful too. It doesn't feel like, oh, hey, look, we're going to misdirect you, or, oh, hey, like, you know, it's
here's that out of context storytelling, you know? It's just like,
it's very purposeful. It's like, you can tell like everything was just planned from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know?
Really good film. There's probably some stuff I wanted to talk about that I left out. But overall, is a one-of-a-kind experience. I think this stands on its own as a very unique experience that has impacted a lot of movies that we have seen. And I don't think people realize that. People watch this movie and you will see where modern movies take their influences from. This movie...
Especially modern action films,
yeah,
too.
This movie just had such a big impact. I can't think of a better movie that just stimulates your mind and your love of movies, you know? It's just like, whoa, like came out this long ago and it has resonance, you know?
Really does.
And early 2000s, like
it's crazy.
Even watching it, I'm like, there's no point when I'm watching it where I'm like, oh, this is dated, you know, this looks dated.
Yeah, it never feels dated at all.
Compared to like seeing early 2000s movies that feel dated, like watching some of the weird edits and like the Matrix movies.
Sure, like the CG,
the awful music choices, and it's just like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Actually, there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. I really love the music in this film. I love the theme they use throughout, especially for like whenever like they use in the credits and that they use for like when the phone rings, you know, it's like a really cool callback to like almost like represent memory almost of like him trying to retrace his steps, you know. I really, really loved the music choices in the film, and they add so much to like just not only the story, but just to like the atmosphere of the film also. Yeah.
Again, my biggest takeaway is just this has to be one of the greatest villains I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Top 5 or top 10, like it's just, he's up there.
I'd say top 3.
And it's just like the reveals and the way they happen are just, you can expect that you're going to know what's going to happen, but you don't, you know? And even now today, I feel like this movie takes risks that
most movies would never even go to that threshold, especially, you know?
Yeah. And I couldn't see this getting made right now and it going well. Definitely check it out if you have the time. You will walk away feeling very different than when you started.
Yeah. You are not the same person after you watch this movie.
And it sticks with you. Like 3 days after I watched it, I was still thinking about it, you know? And that's what I like when I see movies. It's just like when I can't get it out of my mind. It's just like,
it just stays with you.
It holds, you know?
Yeah.
So please check it out. It was amazing. Score wise, I really don't have anything wrong with this movie that I didn't like or I felt could have been done better. This is hard. I'm going to go 9.5. I'm going to go 9.5. The only reason I wouldn't give it a 10 is just because maybe on rewatches, it might not have the same impact. You know, I feel like seeing it that first time is the definitive experience, you know? Obviously I might catch up on stuff in a second viewing, third viewing, but I don't really have enough motivation to watch it again, you know?
I see. I do respectfully disagree, but I could completely understand as considering just how just disturbing it does get, you know? But I feel like for me, because of how it blends genres really well, where it's like one moment it's disturbing, but also in another moment it could be very comedic. You know? It's like it's just a really incredible roller coaster of emotions for me. Hence why I can still rewatch it and still have that same impact I did when I first saw it. Because like even rewatching it yesterday, it was like it felt like the first time I was seeing it again. Even though I knew what was gonna happen, I was still just like my heart was racing. You know, I was just like I was just like, oh my god, like what's gonna happen to these characters? You know, it's like it's kind of odd, but it still really holds up for me. Like on this third viewing, and yeah, for me, it's a 10. It's a 10 out of 10. I think this film is just a masterpiece in every sense of the word. Again, not a single moment is wasted. I love the hell out of this film. And anytime I can recommend this movie to people, I will immediately just recommend it and just be like, you're in for a ride, you know? So yeah.
So check it out. You may like it. You may not. You may finish it. You may not, but you are going to see a very unique movie, stands on its own, and you'll have an experience. That's really just the main point. Is you may like it, you may not like it, but it is effective at what it does, you know, and there's nothing you can really say to bring that down. There's no flaws with this movie, you know. Like, again, the only reason I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 is just like rewatching a movie for me is just something that I do a lot. I rewatch movies on like a constant basis. Can't tell you the amount of times I've seen my favorite movies.
Yeah. Of course.
I just watch them all the time, and it's just something that I get enjoyment out of. And for this one, I would just say maybe I would rewatch it if I was showing someone else the film, and I would just maybe want to see their reaction more than anything.
Yeah.
But I would just feel like, I wouldn't feel like I was actually watching it. You know, I feel like I would be like, well, I'm just kind of eyeing their reaction, you know, seeing how they're going to react. I would say it is a 10 out of 10 just because it is so effective at what it does. But I guess for me, it's just rewatching a movie is just.
Would you just say it's like that emotional like connection, or do you think like
I don't know. I guess I just feel like the reveals and everything just wouldn't have that same impact to where I first saw something, you know. But some of my favorite movies do have that same impact. So I'm just kind of curious, like, why am I thinking that about this movie, you know?
Yeah. Do you think it's because of like that plot twist? You think like maybe that kind of like now that you know what you're in for, do you feel like
I think so much does rely on the unknown of this film. It's just like that's where for me that was like a big part of the intrigue of just like getting answers to these questions, finding out the causation of everything, you know, and getting those reveals. And when they happen, it's just like, whoa. You know, that moment of being like, whoa, like, what was that is just big for me, you know, compared to some of my other favorite movies. They don't really have those types of, what's going on, you know? Yeah, like this movie, I was really like, what is going on? Why is this happening? And I just feel like if I were to watch it again, I'd just be like, oh, I kind of know everything, you know?
Sure.
But still a 9 out of 5.
That's still like
amazing.
that's still really
and who knows,
amazing,
if I watch it again, I might realize that I don't know what I'm talking about, and it's still just as good. I don't know when I'm going to watch it again. I want to tell everyone, obviously, to go see it and let me know what you think about it. Truly a masterclass of filmmaking. Check it out. That's all we got to say.
Please check it out.
Check it out.
It is absolutely worth your time.
We are going to now talk in this movie, obviously, twists and things that happen, reveals that happen in a good way. And we want to talk about some good twists in films and bad twists in films that we have seen. Very relatable question to this movie. Obviously, that's what comes to mind. Like, the twists in this movie are done in such a very good way. And like I said, they reveal some. There's never like a big reveal of like, oh, here's the cause of everything. It's really like kind of
it's sprinkled
layered.
there, yeah.
It's just like, here's one layer of information. Here's another, and just keeps getting like, whoa. I guess one of my favorite reveals in movies, I guess one that's maybe a little underrated because of the film that came before it, is gonna be M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable. I'm sorry, it's one of my favorite movies.
That's one of his better films, though. I will give you that.
The whole time, it's, if you watch it now, it might give you something that you're looking for. It's a superhero film, and it's done in a very real setting. It's like, I guess everyone would say, like, or
it's more grounded.
Yeah. And a good tagline for the movie, as Tarantino says, is what if Superman was on Earth but he didn't know he was Superman? And it's just like, that's very interesting, compared to now. It's just, everyone's like, what if it was Superman but he was evil? And I hate that.
Brightburn.
Yeah, Brightburn, Homelander from The Boys, Omni-Man. I'm just like, all right, we're getting kind of overexposed. Just, sorry, it's a bias. I love Superman. But it proposes the Superman character in an interesting way of this guy who's pretty much invincible, unbreakable, whatever. Finds it out when he's in a accident. He's on a train and it derails, and he's the only survivor. Throughout the movie, he's trying to find answers as to what's going on. He realizes, I've never been sick. I survived a car crash. He just starts to add everything up of like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But he's just your average Joe of, I just work security. I make little money for what I do. I have a family. Like, I don't really have that much purpose, And he's trying to find that. Has he been living a life that he shouldn't have been? Is there maybe more he could be doing, And he finds someone who helps him better understand himself. The character of
Mr. Glass.
Mr. Glass. He is a comic book store owner, and he is kind of crazy, but he's not wrong. He thinks that he has found a superhero, and this is the guy. This is the guy in all these comic books. He's the hero, And throughout the film, it's just, that's where it starts to go. Eventually, he gets to the point where he realizes, like, I can help people. I can help save people. I can do things for others that they can't do themselves. I need to do this. This is probably why I'm here. So he starts to do it. He starts to help people. It never gets to the point where, like, he has a superhero persona or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's done in a really cool way. Then at the end of the film, the twist happens. Turns out Mr. Glass had staged that accident on the train. But not only that accident, he has been responsible for many, many mass murdering accidents that have happened. He's derailed trains. He's killed people,
Yeah.
all in hopes of finding this person, because Mr. Glass is someone who is on the opposite end of the spectrum. His bones break very easy, hence the name Mr. Glass. He's very weak. He's very brittle. And he always thought, well, if I'm this way, there has to be someone out there who's on the other side, who doesn't have these things wrong. And he's just revealed that he is the villain this whole time. Yeah. He's the opposite of the hero, and it's done in a very sad way. And very effective. Samuel L. Jackson's performance is just so good. And I don't know. It's just a twist ending that really stuck with me.
It's definitely one of the twist endings that I feel like works better for Shyamalan, because I
Yeah.
feel like with Shyamalan twists, they're very hit or miss. They could be either like super effective and they add so much to the film, and then other times I feel like it kind of sour like the experience,
Yeah.
or like just kind of ruin the film entirely, where it's just almost kind of used as like a gimmick,
Yeah.
But
And
I
I
oh,
think
sorry.
the reason this one is just, like I said in the beginning, is just kind of forgotten about is because the one that came out before was Signs. Signs just, or not Signs, Sixth Sense.
Sixth
It
Sense.
had such a big impact. That twist ending changed everything in movies. Like, I'm really not lying. Like,
It really,
it
yeah.
had such a big impact, and no one can ever say anything to take that away from Shyamalan. It's just like the realization of everything. Bruce Willis is also in the movie, but I think that's why this one is kind of more forgotten about. And obviously, I'm a superhero guy. I'm a comic book guy, so I think I have a bias as to why I like this one more.
Okay.
Obviously, Sixth Sense reveals just as good. Some people might say is better. I just feel like this one was just very, very sad and just more poignant as like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah.
Like Bruce Willis, you trust this guy, you like this guy, and it's just like, oh, damn,
Yeah, he's really awful.
that's awful.
Yeah.
And it's sad because his story is sad. Like his story is just, he's never really, his whole life he's just been hurt, abused from the moment he was born, and it's just so good. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. What about you?
Nice. For one that comes to mind to me, aside from the Oldboy twist, is my second favorite twist in any film. It's from Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. And for some of you guys who haven't seen The Prestige, it is basically about two magicians who are bitter rivals. And
When did you finally watch this?
Oh, I watched it in high school. So I watched
Really?
So I watched The Prestige in high school, and it blew me away the first time I saw it, and I was like, this is easily my favorite Nolan film. And I had loved the fact that it was using these two magicians as like as a jumping off point to reveal this mystery of like what's going on and how far they can take this magic, And the twist in the film shocked me. I could not believe it. Super heavy spoilers for this one if you guys haven't seen it, but basically it is revealed that there are two Christian Bales, and he's kind of living this sort of double life, and it's crazy. And then on top of it, there's also the Hugh Jackman's character where there's like maybe multiple people of him almost, and it's like it just catches you so off guard because like the entire time it's like, how much more crazy could this get, And it goes to show you how far they can take these like magic tricks and these magic shows, before it's like ruining their lives almost, It's a really, really incredible character study of a film, and it's one of my favorite like just character dynamics, and like their whole rivalry is just so awesome, And the entire time you're just sucked in and you're just like super intrigued with like what's going on. Especially that Nikola Tesla character too. I love how they kind of use like a real life kind of person like in like this fictional film as like a way to like drive the story more. But for me, The Prestige is easily like one of the best examples of like how to use a plot twist in film and how to take advantage of using like twists and turns with this like magic setting.
Yeah, it's a great film. For the people who don't know, this is Christopher Nolan's best film. Very simply put, like, you have to watch this movie. I've shown so many people this movie. Saw it when I was 10 in theaters.
Oh,
and
nice.
Yeah, I was so excited. That was probably one of the first movies I was like excited for that wasn't like a typical movie that I'd be into. I remember seeing the trailers for it and my brother being like, the guy who made Batman Begins made this movie. And I was just like, what? And I was like, oh, that looks cool. And it was like the magicians and everything. Granted, I was 10, so I probably didn't get the most out of it. But I do remember leaving and liking it. I was like, wow, that was cool,
Yeah.
And then now when I rewatched it, I think it was like 5 years later, I had bought it on Blu-ray. Absolutely amazing. Just like Wallied said, the reveals and everything, the way it's done, so good. Such a sad story. And the exposition, there's a lot of exposition in the film, but if you can and sift through it and really pay attention to it, it is so effective. And it's done in such a good way. I just simply love it. I think it's a perfect film. However, the only thing that isn't perfect is the song on the credits.
What song was it?
It's like some 2000s rock song. Like I said, you know how like the credits would have that? I was just like, great.
I'm glad we've moved past that.
Really, though. It's so good.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear you've seen it. That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm like, anytime like anybody talks about Nolan, I feel like I don't really hear as many people talking about it, you know? And of course, like I think Nolan is a really good director, but I feel like this one just kind of just gets overlooked a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I feel
there's more of a resurgence now. I hear it brought up a lot more over the past couple years. I think when the pandemic happened, more people went back and probably watched it. So I do hear a lot more now that it's people's favorite Nolan movie. But it had been mine for a long freaking time.
Yeah, it had been mine since I was 15.
Yeah. So I'm glad it's getting the exposure it is now. Yeah, it's super good. I'm glad you brought that one up.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about good plot twists in film. Now we get to talk about the other side, bad plot twists in film. I'll let you go first. I'm going to...
Well, seeing as you brought up M. Night,
oh, no.
I was going to say, even though I do like the movie, unfortunately, it just kind of ruins it a bit for me, but I'm going to say Signs.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like so much stuff is built up from the beginning with like the aliens, you know, there's so much fear of like the unknown. It's like you don't know what's going on. And it's like once it reveals like the aliens and like just like their weakness, I feel like it just like kind of makes the aliens look silly, and it just kind of ruins like the overall tone of like the film for me, unfortunately. But I don't know how like you I'm sorry, I don't know how like you feel on that, but for me it just like
I love Signs. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But I guess I see the side of like people saying like, "Oh, it's really water. Why would they go to a planet with water on it?"
Like
if
come
they
on.
know, you know, but one can argue like, well, maybe there's resources on the planet that they want to obtain, you know, things like that. Maybe there's something that they're after that causes them to go to these extreme circumstances, because that's what we do. That's what humans do, you know, like to survive, you'll put yourself in a dangerous situation, you know. So I don't really put too much stock there. I guess the one thing that is kind of dumb in the movie is just like they couldn't open like a door, they couldn't break it down. I guess, but I'm like, I don't know. Eventually it does break out. I mean, but it's not a break for me. I don't know. I guess my experience with Signs is different than some other people. I obviously the aliens and everything is kind of like the main draw of the film, but I think the movie is really more so about a man questioning his faith, not about these aliens and why they're there to invade.
Yeah,
you see a man in the story, just he had lost his wife. He was a pastor, you know, and it's kind of funny. They never really specify like what religion. It's not really religious. It's not a religious movie. It really is about a man questioning his faith of like, my wife was taken from me. I serve this, you know, higher being, yet this happened to me, you know. Why would I still be inclined to think this, you know? It takes this whole exposure with these, you know, extraterrestrial creatures to really make him realize why he gets in touch with that side of him, you know. And it's done in such a good way, and I don't know, I think that's why the film works for me, is just like, I don't think there really is a twist in the movie, you know. I feel like people, I feel like so? Signs Sixth Sense and everyone just kind of propped us up to think that about M. Night, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's why in the following film, In the Village, he goes back to that kind of twisting. I think in The Sixth Sense, it wasn't really meant to be more than just the aliens are taken away, you know, like like I don't think it was meant to be like this dramatic big reveal, you know.
Okay.
Because figure, like, the climax of the movie is not these aliens losing or whatever, it's his son living, you know. His son is on the verge of death, and he gets in touch with his faith. He's starts praying for the first time he has since his wife passed away, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, even at that point, when the world was ending and all these aliens were there, never at one point did he feel the need to get in touch with his faith, you know, compared to most other people. And they say it in the movie, like, people have gone to churches, they're hiding out at churches now, they're praying, like, people are trying to pretty much pray for the end of the world and ready themselves for what's about to happen. But he doesn't do that. A man that was so in touch with his faith and preached it to a bunch of people, even at that point when he's at his lowest and on the verge of death, he's boarding up his house to save his family. That still doesn't push him there, you know? It takes him to lose another loved one in his life and to finally get back in touch with that side of him. And I don't know, that's what I see when I watch the movie, and I think that's why it's one of my favorite movies, from one of my favorite M. Night movies. And it's just, I feel like everyone kind of got caught up in, like, oh, M. Night, he's the twist guy, you know? Robot Chicken would say, make all the jokes about him.
That's an interesting, I will say that is like an interesting perspective and like way to kind of look at the film. Cause like when I saw Signs, like, you know, a couple of times in high school, like I never really thought of it like that way. I always kind of just like thought of it as like, oh, it's trying to be like this kind of alien invasion movie with some like religious symbolism stuff like sprinkled in there, you know, where it was more focused on like these fear of like the aliens and like the fear of like how the media portrays aliens, you know? And I think when I saw that and they had like revealed the aliens and everything, that's why it kind of ruined, not as like where I can't watch it again, but it kind of just like soured the experience a bit for me, you know? These aliens seemed so intimidating, but yeah, just kind of didn't work too much for me. But,
I think that's why I think he's is very much of like I don't know. It's like a blending of two movies, you know?
Yeah.
Like he portrayed it as like this, obviously an alien invasion story, but when you really start to watch it, you're like, oh, this isn't what the movie's actually about, you know? Like, yeah, it's a plot. It's a plot of the movie, but the aliens and stuff, when you watch the movie, are never really given that much attention. You know, there's just brief scenes with him in the cornfield or the birthday scene, you know, just brief stuff is shown. And I think you start to realize, like, okay, maybe I was looking in the wrong place. You know, I was hoping for this alien invasion story about this family when it's like, that's really just kind of just like a small plot to the movie, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know.
I see.
I'd recommend watching it again and really just seeing the family side of it, especially with him and the brother, him and his kids. Mel Gibson does a really good job in that movie of portraying a dad who's just trying everything he can to keep his family together when his wife and mother of his kids was taken from him.
I really love Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that film too. Also, I think he's really great in the film.
Very good. Also. Yeah, I don't know. I think you were just expecting something that was never supposed to be there.
Maybe, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I'd be interested to revisit it.
I mean,
just hearing from like that perspective, at least, you know, it's like.
I mean, what is the ending shot of the film?
Sorry, it's been a while.
It's him putting on his pastor outfit. He's gonna go preach again. And all of this small town during the movie, they come up to him, they keep calling him father, and he's like, please stop calling me that. You know, there's so much in the movie that is just, it's about a man regaining his faith. So good. Yeah.
I see.
And I just applaud Shyamalan for that. You know, he could have just made a alien movie, but I think he was like, let me do something a little bit more than that. You know, I can give people the alien, because there are scares in the movie.
Yeah.
When I was watching it as a kid, I was terrified. There's effective alien stuff in there, and they actually go into a lot of like quote unquote like alien type mythology of just like the kid reading the books, and he's just like, well, if aliens did come here, you know, it's kind of one of two reasons. They're hoping to make contact, or they want our planet for resources, you know, because that's kind of how it would work. And so many scientists now, theorists, they say, oh, if aliens made it here, like, we would be done. Like, they would just be on another level. That it'd be like Godzilla versus Kermit the Frog. Like, we would be annihilated, you know? And they go into that in the movie, which they really didn't have to, you know? Mm-hmm. And I guess I kind of applaud them for that. But yeah, you'll have to rewatch it.
Yeah, I definitely will, and I'll
you
let
might
you know.
You might have a new enjoyment of it, I would hope, but
yeah, I'd be curious, since it has been just kind of a while since I've seen it.
Yeah,
because I saw it like, I want to say like 5 to 7 years ago, so it's been kind of a bit. But yeah,
it's really good.
How about you? What's a bad example for you?
Bad twist in a film. Oh, okay.
All right, what you got?
Oh my God. All right. So this was in the era of before Now. Will Smith was kind of like a big movie draw. And we went to go see this movie. My dad wanted to go see it. It was called Hancock. Coincidentally, it's another superhero movie.
Okay.
Superman's here, and he's kind of an asshole. He's a piece of shit. And it's it's so stupid. Sorry, he's a piece of shit. Right. Like, he really he's like flies around drunk. It's really dumb. Okay. And I guess what you see throughout the movie is like people around him want him to be a hero, you know? So he kind of works towards that, you know? He starts, you know, trying to better himself and everything. And I'm like, okay, like it's like not, it's drawing my attention, I would say, you know?
Yeah.
But then the reveal at the end, his wife from before, I don't even remember.
Was it like Charlize Theron's character?
Turns out she has superpowers too, and he can't like be around her or something. It was so dumb. I was just like, wow, like they really just like went for it.
Yeah.
It's so like just like on the nose. It's just like the first half sets up something totally different than the last half.
Oh, you know? Okay.
And it's just like, even past the twist, it's like some bad guy trying to like obtain something from these heroes or something. It was just like really dumb. It was done in such a stupid way. Because granted, I guess I liked the first half. I felt like, oh, this is cool. It's kind of like, you know, a different way of like, oh, superhero mythology. But what if they weren't the greatest type person, but they weren't completely evil, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like now we're just on those two sides of the spectrum. So it's kind of like in the middle. So I was like, all right, this is pretty interesting. And just the reveal of his wife, you know, having these powers. And it's just like, it's just so dumb. I was just like,
sure, yeah.
I don't really care about this. And yeah, it was played up as one thing and you end up getting another. And I think that's sometimes it can work, sometimes it can't. And in this instance, it just really felt like two total opposites. And they try to force them together to make it work, you know?
Yeah.
Which, if you have a really talented director and writer, it can work, but we didn't happen in this case, you know?
Sure, yeah. I remember seeing bits and pieces of it like a long time ago when I was like, I think like 5 or 8.
Yeah.
And I think that was like one of the things that did stick out to me was like the twist, because I was like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
yeah.
What? You know?
Really dumb.
Yeah.
There's probably other bad twists out there. Obviously, Shyamalan has really bad ones that I wanted to bring up. But all right. The next question we have is films that blend genres really well. This is a very interesting question. I guess I'll let you start. That's something we did notice in Oldboy is just it has everything. It has a lot of different stuff working in it. Doesn't feel out of place. Like Hancock.
yeah. Not like Hancock.
But films that blend these types of genres and things really well. I guess it's something that you would think.
So for me, a lot of Korean films, I feel like, especially, I don't know what it is, but Korean cinema blends these genres extremely well. And the two great directors that come to mind for me is the director of Oldboy, Park Chan-wook himself, and Bong Joon-ho. And so with Park Chan-wook, I'm going to go with The Handmaiden, his other masterpiece film. It was the first film I saw of his. It is basically a crime, drama, romance, mystery, little bit of comedy in there sprinkled in there too. But the way it tells its story is really, really incredible. And like the entire time you're figuring out what's going on. It's kind of a little hard to talk about because it's another one where it's like it's a bit easy to spoil, but it is not one you should watch with anybody because there's a lot of very erotic scenes in the film, but it's very purposefully and tastefully done where it doesn't feel out of place and it doesn't take you out of the film where it's just like, oh, this is just forced. And yeah, there's a lot of purpose to everything, especially with how like each act of the film is like you get different perspectives, and then like the third act is like everything comes together super, super well without getting too into it. It's kind of like the general idea pretty much,
Wow.
But it's very incredible. Not one you should watch with your parents. Don't do that. But that's one that I feel like just comes to mind for me. And then for Bong Joon-ho, I would say like, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, Nabahi. It's called The Host.
I've heard of it.
Amazing film. It is a monster comedy drama, family drama film. It's insane. Like, it's single-handedly my favorite monster movie ever. And not only on top of that, but it's also like a really incredible political thriller also with how the film portrays how like the Korean government would react if they were to be like a, contagious monster that they made in a laboratory. It's super, super well done. And it is, on top of it, like the characters are just so four-dimensional. Like there's so much to just get out of the characters. Like you love every single one. You're like on the edge of your seat of like, are they going to make it or not? But for me, that film is just absolutely amazing. And I would say that about all of Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho's films, especially Bong Joon-ho's films. Like, he is like the master of blending genres super well, where it's like it never feels mushy or just like out of place. Like, it's just this roller coaster of emotions, like as you're watching it,
Wow.
But yeah, those are my two examples.
I guess for me, one of the ones that stands out because it just really feels like a mash of a bunch of different stuff, I would say is The Big Lebowski. Nice. Has like that dark humor, that crime angle of like mystery of like what's going on. And it's just it makes me laugh at so many parts. It's just like, what is this, Yeah. And even the title, you're just like The Big Lebowski, like, what is that, And it's just really just like, you really have to watch it. And I don't know, for me, it's just like, I'm a very, I gravitate towards that dark type humor as some of my favorite moments in comedy. And that movie just has so many of them that I can just quote, and like even thinking about it, I'm just like, how did they come up with this? Like, that's like some of the most ridiculous funny stuff I've ever seen. Coen Brothers do that in a couple of their movies like Fargo, but I think Big Lebowski really is just like a very big blend of a bunch of different stuff. Yeah. Like even like the intro, like either like to this character and everything, it just starts out in the weirdest way. And everything just works though. Like everything really works. And it's just like, I don't know. It's hard to describe. It really is one of my favorite movies. I hadn't seen it for the longest time, and then watching it, I was just like, how have I not seen this movie? This movie's like so funny and so stupid.
Yeah. That's a really good pick.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I just really like that blend of stuff. Coen Brothers do a lot of that dark humor stuff. I know we had talked about Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah,
that one might be really good too, just because it has the whole music angle.
Yeah, that's a really amazing movie.
Yeah.
It really connected with me a lot.
And especially with them getting the musical supervisor of T-Bone Burnett, like he's so good at remastering and recontextualizing old type songs in like a new way. Yeah. I really felt like that is such a good benefit of that movie. But yeah, the Coen Brothers, their recent stuff hasn't been some of my favorite, but I mean, they're just so good at blending that type of stuff that it's just like, I just often think like, how do they do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, Big Lebowski is one that I think is just crazy, super funny. Definitely check it out. I guess another one that comes to mind, Shaun of the Dead.
Whoa.
Super funny.
Classic film.
Zombie storyline blended with a bunch of humor. Really, really funny. I think that was like the start of those types of
like kind of
satire. I think it was like the start of all that.
You think so?
I think when it came out, it really just had like a really big impact where I started seeing more satirical type movies. And I feel like maybe that one just kind of hit the mainstream a little bit more than some other.
Yeah, because I feel like with that one, like it's like, even though it is like satirizing zombie films, it's like it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
You know? Like it goes beyond just even that, where it's like it's almost just its own thing, you know?
No, I'm not trying to like throw it in like a satire type box.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying like I felt like it inspired a lot of those later
like
satire movies. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Just because it came out very quickly after like that whole resurgence with 28 Days Later.
That's right. Yeah.
What was the Zack Snyder one?
Oh God, Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead.
His
remake,
yeah.
It came after that whole wave of like zombie craze, and it was just done in such a really good way, and it has emotional moments, comedy, just
absolutely.
Edgar Wright is a guy who just does that so well,
and then just again like that quick pace that he does with a lot of his films, where just communication is just explained super well, where it's like it's fast but you can still understand like what's going on. You never feel like lost or confused, you know? And then there's just so many great little quips and jokes, it's one of those films where it's like you just rewatch it over and over again, and it's like you could still pick up on like different things in the film,
Such a funny movie to watch even today. Definitely. It's just super hilarious, really, really hilarious. I guess that encapsulates Oldboy, crazy film.
I'm happy you finally watched it.
I'm happy I finally watched it. You can bet I'm going to be telling people to watch it. It's a new movie to recommend to people, so check it out if you haven't seen it. It is my turn to recommend a movie. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, what are you going to recommend for next episode?
John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China.
Okay.
That is going to be my next recommendation.
I have not seen that. So.
I think it's funny because all the movies we have been discussing are like very emotional, high interest films. The only one I would say that wasn't like that was One Cut of the Dead. So I guess this one will be kind of similar to that in a sense, to where it's
lighthearted.
Yeah, lighthearted. It's I don't know. This is just one of my favorite movies. It's not my favorite John Carpenter movie, but it is just so unique and it's so hilarious that I don't know. It's so dumb too, but I think that's just the charm of it. Is John Carpenter kind of knew what he was working with, and he just goes for it. So much in the movie is just ridiculous. So much in the movie is just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But I laughed so much when I watched this movie. If I were ever to make films I think it'd be so funny to like make a bunch of, emotional drama films, then to do something like this just to see what people would do. Because John Carpenter, he was the horror guy. He was making Halloween, The Thing, and then to do something like this is just like, what is this,
Yeah.
I'm so excited to talk about this movie.
Cool.
You're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it.
Yeah, we'll see. I've heard a lot about it for a long time, so it's kind of like perfect to watch.
And I think that's why it's one of my favorites, is just because it's like it doesn't break ground in filmmaking or storytelling or anything like that.
Sure.
But I rewatch it so much because of the absurdity and because of the humor,
Honestly, though, sometimes a film doesn't really need to do that, though, like reinvent the wheel or anything. Sometimes it can just be a great film and just kind of maybe be a little bit more simple, so.
And I think that's why I wanted to recommend it, just because I noticed our list was very, we started out with some high emotional, high concept movies.
Yeah, of course.
And
it's always a little break from that.
Yeah, it's nice to just have that movie where it's just like I can just kind of just sit down and just
enjoy myself.
Just
for
enjoy it, Yeah.
Well, for our listeners, if you guys don't want to be spoiled for Big Trouble in Little China by John Carpenter, Kurt Russell film, make sure you guys watch it before the next episode.
I enjoyed it when I was a kid because I was actually like into like I guess the mythology of the movie, but now as I grow up, I love it for a different reason, which is cool because sometimes you grow old and you look back on some movies you liked and you're like, why did I like this?
Yeah, sometimes it ages well, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
the best. So,
but yeah, I'm really excited. We're gonna hopefully be kind of back on a consistent schedule. Me and Wallied have both seen Furiosa, so at some point we're gonna record a review for that one. Just because I have a lot to say about it. I think it's my favorite movie of the year so far.
Wow. Yeah, I have some stuff to say about it. I have some thoughts.
And I think it'll be interesting to have different contrasting opinions about a movie, because I think that's where me and Wallied have been pretty consistent on, is like we kind of think the same about a lot of movies, but I think it would be kind of nice to have a movie where it's like, okay, Wallied thinks one way, I think another,
It's a bit more polar opposites.
Yeah, and maybe we could see what kind of middle ground we can reach, I think that's always interesting. But hopefully we'll record that one soon. Super excited to talk about that movie. There's some other movies coming out that I want to see. We're gonna watch them all, and if Wallied is into it and he wants to do a review, we'll do it. If he doesn't want to, I'm not gonna force him to.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
I think that's it for this time. It was great to be back. Check out the movies if you haven't seen them. And yeah, just look out for more episodes. I think that's really it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, thank you all for listening. I hope to see you guys soon. Good day and good night, mates. That's my new catchphrase for the end.
What's mine? What is mine? If I'm not back by dawn, call the president.
Perfect.